All right, here we are. But of course, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe before we truly get on into things here for SERRAL versus ZEST in the quarterfinals of TSL7. And spawning in the bottom right, in the red, he is, for NC Sports, the Night King, SERRAL. And his opponent spawning in the upper left, in the blue for Dragon Phoenix Gaming, the Kingslayer, ZEST. And it's always kind of interesting when we watch this. I mean, just off of monikers here. I mean, we know who's going to win already. ZEST is the Kingslayer and SERRAL's the Night King. So very clearly, this is just going to be a clean 3-0. We don't even have to watch the games anymore. Doesn't matter. ZEST, I mean, he's going to win in 2 minutes in each game. But nah, that's not really what's really going to happen here. If that happens, your boy's going to be very sad. Because this is absolutely a marquee matchup here. SERRAL, of course, maybe not quite as successful this year, or really last year, as he was when everything was offline, but he's still damn strong. And we can still expect to see dramatic results from him, especially in this matchup that really he has made his own over the last, really as long as he's been at the top, right? He was one of the last players that was using Hydraling Bane when it was not good anymore, because it was still good for him, right? He understands this matchup. He understands the timings. And he's very good at beating those dastardly Protoss players. But ZEST, for his part, he has been the progenitor of so many builds that make life as a Zerg player so difficult. I mean, we all remember Katowice 2020, where he goes in there and he beats every single Zerg but Rogue with the Adept Glaive build. I mean, yes, there were other things thrown on in there, but Adept Glaives were what drove him to that grand finals. Now, of course, the meta has evolved since then. ZEST has had periods of dominance and periods of less dominance, but you know, of recent months, he's looked like his old form again. He made, once again, the Katowice Grand Finals, this time losing to Raynor in a much closer series than the series against Rogue, what, 2 years prior? No, actually, that was a year prior, yeah. Of course, that of course, was the Katowice where it was only the players present. But anyways, it's not going to be a glaive opening here from ZEST in this game number one. No. This is going to be a Stargate opener here, which makes sense. This is kind of the standard, and it's interesting because there was the build that Trap developed, right? Where you go Warp Gate into Stargate, 353rd base, second Stargate, and you just greed it up, but you have 6 Fortress and you're fine. And then most players, ZEST in particular here, if we look at kind of the dichotomies of the Stargate openers, he really enjoys getting that early Stargate unit. All right, so he goes Stargate into Warp Gate, just trying to make sure that he can get on into the Void Ray, into the Oracle, into whatever he wants ASAP. Right, this allows him a little bit more map control, but on the flip side, it does mean his Warp Gate does get a more significantly delayed. So he's not going to have more Adepts on the ground. He's not going to have more Zealots on the ground. Whatever he wants to make sure that he can defend the potential third. But when we talk about this, let me talk about, okay, it's Void Ray first here. It's going to knock down the Overlords and maybe get a second if there's one on the map and if ZEST is able to find it. ZEST has been doing this build where he kind of goes for this. Never mind. We see Probe on the third base. We're not going to see what I was talking about. But he does this 2.5 base carrier build where he gets 3 Oracles really quickly. I believe he still does get a Void Ray first. And then he goes on into carriers, goes into that second Stargate, and gets a delayed third base. It's not a 2-base carrier build like some of you may be familiar with. But it's a delayed third, right? It's still a 2.5 base carrier build. But again, that's not what we see here. As it's an Oracle, it's a Void Ray, but okay, there is a second Stargate at the very least. So this looks like it will be the traditional build here. As SERRAL, well, he will scout this eventually, and he's going to have a good idea of what is happening. But now the Oracle's going to look to dive on in to the natural, and hey, it's 1 worker for the moment, and 1 worker for 1 Oracle is, I do not recommend. I do not recommend that one whatsoever here. Anyway, so second Stargate, of course, on the way. +1 air attack on the way, too. So Zesty's really leaning into that air defense at the expense of everything else. And if you're able to get there, I mean, +1 air attack takes a while to get to. But if you're able to get to it, Void Rays trade so much better against Queens when you have that +1 attack. Because, again, Phoenix, or really carriers are one, right? Because it applies to everything. But really, Void Rays are another one where their attack, it appears to be constant, but really it's just a bunch of small attacks. And they attack so fast that it really applies heavily to these carriers. Now, that may not even really matter here, as well, the Adepts are going to find their way out into the natural and third base. One will go down, but one Adept for 6 workers, absolutely there. That is more damage than we see in 99 games out of 100. When we're talking about this early game, kind of little bits of Adept pressure here, but SERRAL, he doesn't really care. I mean, yeah, he doesn't want to lose those workers, but he's got Queens running across the map already. Roach is on the way. It's a Queen walk, and, well, they're going to waddle here. The question now is whether ZEST is prepared. His +1 air attack, it's only about halfway done, so it will not be valuable. It will not be a valid component of the first hold. But it may be viable as the hold does move on here. As the Void Rays, they're looking to just take as much damage away from these Queens as they can before anything really gets started in earnest. And, well, for the moment, they're really not able to do a whole lot. But what they are doing is hopefully buying time. They're preventing these Zerglings that run in from really getting too much here as well. They will have to micro out of the way now as these Ravagers do drop vials on top. But it is buying time for cannons. It is buying time for more shield batteries to make sure that, well, there's enough static defense that maybe allows ZEST to hold on in here. As again, the Void Rays, they're going to have to micro away from all of these vials, but they're still doing a fairly good job. They're still standing strong, and +1 air, it's closer to being done. It's about 20 seconds out. And once again, once that +1 air attack is done, this push from SERRAL is going to be a far, far inferior to the push that it once was. So yes, we're starting to see some static defense go down, but there are just more and more Void Rays on the way. It is 10 seconds until we see that +1, and a lot of the Queens, they've already gone down. Okay, there we go. We will see our first Void Ray die down here as the static defense is really starting to fall on down. But +1 is done, which means the Void Rays, they can just tap these Queens down, bippity bappity boppity. Well, ZEST base is once again his property here, as the army, the push here from SERRAL is just falling down flat on his face. Yes, Zerglings are starting to knock down some, and I mean some of the economy, but as long as ZEST keeps the base up, he doesn't really care about losing 4 workers, right? That is absolutely acceptable damage. SERRAL is never going to find his way on into the natural, and ZEST is held with flying colors. And notice, he's not going to go into carriers off that. He's not going to turtle up and give SERRAL an opportunity to maybe try to grow again, to maybe try to respawn. No, it's +1 air attack. It is a Templar Archives. Excuse me, it is a Twilight Council. And all of this means that ZEST, well, he's going to have an army quickly. He's going to have a powerful ground army a lot faster than SERRAL may otherwise expect. And with SERRAL only on 46 workers, it's going to be difficult indeed for him to stop it. Now, the Void Rays may not be able to accomplish a lot because there are, there are actually only 5 Hydras on the map. So these Void Rays can fight these Hydras with the lack of +1 air. Actually, especially if the Queens are not there. So, yeah, Void Rays are just going to be able to fight these Hydras as they micron out of there. Honestly, I think you take that fight. You lose a Void Ray. Well, actually, never mind here. ZEST will not lose a Void Ray. And therefore, he is totally fine. So charges on the way, +1 ground attack on the way, 8 gateways to allow ZEST to really fuel that ground-based army that he's looking for. And we're going to see Storm. We're going to see Archons. Actually, we may not even need to wait here for Storm. Archon, Charge Lot Archon, maybe all that ZEST needs to really, really sledgehammer his way on into SERRAL's homeland. SERRAL's heartland is with the 10 Void Rays on top. As long as these Hydras die, it doesn't really matter what the rest of ZEST's army does. I mean, it's nice if you get damage done, but realistically, if the Void Rays just sweep down everything that can kill them off, at that point, there's not a whole lot that SERRAL can do. So now SERRAL, once again, he is walking. These boots were made for walking, but unfortunately, SERRAL got a knockoff brand. And in fact, they were not made for walking at all. You walk a little bit too far, and the glue, the heel pops off, and you're like, oh, well, that wasn't great here. So +1 is done. Charges not yet. So SERRAL has found a little bit of a timing here where he may be able to shove his way on in, as we are starting to see some production go down, some Cybercore units as well, or the Cybercore going down as well. But again, +1 air, +1 ground. There are no upgrades for the Zerg here, and that makes this army just paper in the wind, dust in the wind. As SERRAL, he's trying to make this push happen, but he will be wholly unsuccessful. GG. That's going to be it. ZEST takes game number 1. All right, now once again, we are here in game number 2. ZEST took game number 1. Really in a fantastic gold. He got +1 there on his Void Rays, and that was all he needed. But now it's a game 2. It's another game. It's a bigger map. And spawning the upper right in the red, he is, for NC Sports, SERRAL. And of course, his opponent spawning the bottom left in the blue for Dragon Phoenix Gaming, the one, the only, he is ZEST. And as mentioned previously, ZEST took game number 1, but honestly, it felt like it was more of SERRAL losing game number 1 than ZEST winning. And that's not because ZEST didn't have a good hold. He did, but it was more like, you know, SERRAL runs on in there and he says, I'm going to go kill my Protoss opponent. And then he doesn't. And, well, there's not much you can do at that point. I mean, the Hydra bust was a cool attempt, but it really just was never really going to work out. And now we're in game 2, right? This is a bigger map. I think we're going to see ZEST do something similar to what he did in game number 1, right? Because A, it worked, and B, we're in a bigger map. So that build he went for generally works better the bigger the map is. And if that's not really, if the map is still small and you pull it off, well, you're certainly going to be able to pull it off on a slightly bigger map here. That being said, Juggernaut, it looks bigger. It has more maps, or it has more bases. But still, the rush distance natural to natural is not all that different, right? Because you do have those speed zones. We are still early days here in this game, so really neither player has shown exactly what they want to go for. Although that probe dropping the pylon in the middle right, well, that's a little bit sneaky. That's a little bit suspicious here, especially considering it is continuing to patrol. It will build something after that. We're not going to see the, oh, I'm just skipping a pylon build that sometimes you see in PvP where the Protoss is like, I'm absolutely not doing anything crazy. I'm just, you know, putting a pylon out in the middle of the map and hoping my opponent freaks out because they see that I'm only on 2 pylons instead of 3, or only 1 pylon instead of 2, depending on that timing. So it will be a proxy Stargate here from ZEST. And I cannot remember the last time I saw a proxy Stargate against Zerg. Stargate builds, absolutely, run of the mill. But proxying that Stargate for a really quick Oracle in professional play, you just don't see it. So, I mean, with that being the case, it's really going to be interesting to see just how much damage ZEST is able to get done with this. Well, SERRAL's not going to scout anything, and I'm really scouting that lack of something, getting the Zergling on in, getting the Overlord in as well, saying, hey, look, it is 3 minutes. I don't see any tech from you. In fact, SERRAL actually should have been able to count the pylons as well and realize that 1 is short. And notice, there we go. Immediately, we see a spore underway. I believe that's in the main base. And that does mean, let's actually take a look. Yeah, so spore underway in the main base here. And that does mean that SERRAL really shouldn't take too much damage to this. Because again, if this was a normal spore timing, we'd see it go down right around now. But instead, it's done right around now. So SERRAL actually, he's just going to scout the Oracle coming on in as well. He's like, okay, I know what's up here. And actually, the Zerglings will find this. So SERRAL really shouldn't take that much damage from this at all. And ZEST, his hopes and dreams that he put on dropping an Oracle in the main base at 3:30 instead of 4 minutes and hoping that SERRAL is not paying attention. Well, it's not there. It is not going to be a thing anymore. Maybe the Oracle's going to find damage later on. ZEST is, of course, a master at repurposing early tools for later damage. But for the moment here, ZEST, he will absolutely strike out. And I like what we're seeing from ZEST here because normally, okay, what he's doing is analogous to the stats build, right? You go on in there, you open Stargate, and you're like, I'm going Stargate, I'm expanding. But you don't. You get a rather quick glaives, and you hope that the Zerg has overcommitted to air defense and drones behind that, and then they don't have enough on the ground. But, well, you get quick glaives, and you look to punish that. Anyways, as now, well, again, we do have glaives about halfway done. This will be, actually, excuse me, this will be 4-gate glaives. Yes, this will be 4-gate glaives coming on in from ZEST. So again, an aggressive version. The Trap, by the way, has been playing 3-gate glaives a lot. You can get just about as much damage done with 3-gate glaives as you can get done with 4-gate glaives, and you tend to have a better economy behind it, right? Because you're warping in 1 less adept every time, and well, also you're getting your third base faster, you're probing out more, you've bought 1 less gate. It works out rather well on all fronts. So the Zerglings will find these adepts, but of course with the Oracle in the sky, it will be wholly unsuccessful. And now it's our turn to see what SERRAL has in store to counter this, because again, these adepts, they're mostly dealt with. SERRAL really should not be too worried about this anymore because, again, there's no robo. It's just 4-gate glaives. And with this build, you just kind of run across the map and you say, yeah, I've got like 14 glaive adepts. Let's see if I can get something done. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, well, SERRAL Roach is on the way. He's queens. He's going to be totally fine here. Especially with the wall going on up. So the adepts will shade on top of things, but the Zerglings here, the queens here as well. And the Oracle can't get even close because it has lost a significant portion of its health as well. Maybe if these queens go down, the Oracle's going to be able to get something, and maybe that's the idea here for ZEST. But for the moment, well, it will be unsuccessful. There we even have the cancel on the walls. SERRAL will not make that mistake. And from this point, well, it's just going to be more roaches, +1, more queens, and I think we're just going to see SERRAL walk across the map rather soon. He only has 3 gas. So that's just enough for a continuous Roach Ravager production. And again, with the queens behind it, it's going to be a powerful army indeed. Now, we don't see the massive supply bump that we normally see. And actually, no, SERRAL, he's not going to walk across the map here. He doesn't feel like this is the best way to punish, which, again, he's SERRAL. I'm just a commentator. I'll trust him on this one. Instead, it's going to be a Spire underway. Now, a couple players, Solar is a big example. DRG is a big example. Raynor is a big example. Have really been enjoying Muta Corruptor against Protoss, especially against Stargate openers over the last month and a half, right? It does a really good job of forcing the Protoss player to stay in non-carriers, to avoid that really powerful carrier storm composition that is so difficult for Zergs to deal with. As this Oracle actually may be able to knock this hatchery down, as it is slowly dropping here. And I think... Yep, okay, there we go. We'll force a cancel here. SERRAL does cancel that and immediately remakes it. Now, ZEST, for his part, he is going to go for a ground-based style. This will not be quick carriers. In fact, ZEST should not be allowed to get away with quick carriers after committing to an Oracle that got nothing done, although I guess it did just get the 4th canceled. And also, you know, committing to glaive adepts that continue to get nothing done here. If he went carriers off of that, really, he should just be sledgehammered into oblivion with, you know, 200 supply of roaches. Instead, he's going for Colossus here. He's going for a more traditional ground army, shall we say. Although I did kind of expect disruptors, again, just considering the tech path that SERRAL has shown. But now we do have our Spire done here. We have +1 air attack underway, but we don't see any mutas yet. We don't see any corruptors. But considering the fact that, well, we have melee on the way, we have Baneling speed on the way, we do see SERRAL going on up to about 80 workers, about 77, 80 workers. This will be mutas. This is absolutely should be mutas here. Mutiling Bane is a thing, even if it's less of a thing against Protoss than it is against, say, Terran. And now the question, the onus is really on ZEST to see if he's going to be able to deal with that. And hey, the Oracle continues to find damage as it should get like 4 or 5 more workers here. It delayed the 4th base, and we talked about this earlier on in the game about how ZEST is really good at finding value from things that failed to find value in the first place. We saw this happen in Game 1. We've seen this happen in Game 2 now with the Oracles. And well, we're gonna have to see whether it's gonna happen with in the follow-on game series. Now the mutas have shown themselves out on the map. I don't know if ZEST has quite seen them yet, but this is a lot of mutas here. 12 mutas are on the field. A +1 air attack is about 2/3 of the way done here. And SERRAL behind this, he is going for that. He is going for that hive, or at least the infestation pit, which will turn on into a hive. So maybe he's going to go for a Broodlord timing behind this with +1 air. And of course, also +2 ground attack as well, +2 melee, which does impact those broodlings. Now, the mutas, they haven't found any value yet. ZEST is just doing such a good job here of blinking around, corralling these mutas, making sure that they're really not allowed to accomplish their set goals. But that's just one army for ZEST. He does have another. It is active on the other side of the map here. ZEST is just doing such a good job of warding these mutas out. They found 0 damage, and already 3 or 4 of them have gone down. Actually, well, I think it's only 2 now. Okay, 3 go down. Now we're going to see a little bit more here. Now they're going to be truly boxed on in. Stalkers morph on in. But no, we don't have a blink. So, mutas won't go down here. And now it is ZEST's turn to push out on the map. He has more army supply. He has more actionable army supply. And all that SERRAL really has going for him here is the potential for a massive Baneling surround. But the force fields in the front are going to be fantastic. Force fields from behind are going to be less so as Banelings are connecting onto everything. But the Colossus, they are still standing strong. And it is a surround of a surround of a surround, as we need to see. There we go. The last Colossus will get picked on up here. Well, I should say the second to last one is one Colossus does still stand strong. More and more Blink Stalkers getting warped on in, and this was just one big alley-oop attempt from ZEST, right? Or excuse me, from SERRAL. Have all of the Banelings run on in, explode everything, and it either wins and you win, or it doesn't work and you lose, because that was the majority of the gas here that SERRAL has built on up. And yes, he does have an army supply lead, but 12 of that is in mutas, an army that really will not be able to fight here, as it's just going to look to move on the other side of the map. But there is a cannon, there is a shield battery. ZEST does not have much to worry about for the time being here, as the cannon has already killed one muta, I believe. Maybe it's even going to get a second. And the Stalkers are going to blink on forward here in staggered blinks, trying to bait out some Baneling connections that are inefficient. But now if SERRAL had a timing, this would be it here. His +2 melee is just about done, finishing just now, which means that, yes, his army is going to be that much more powerful, but I'm not sure that much more powerful is powerful enough. Again, it is a Blinkstalker Colossus against a bunch of Banelings, a bunch of Zerglings, and with the dearth of sentries, maybe that's what SERRAL's going to look to really make use of, because there's no way to prevent the Banelings from really making contact with this Colossus outside of the stasis trap, which does exist, right? It is finding value, or it has the potential to find value. All right, oh, this is pretty cool here. So we're going to see Colossus going to find its way up. And is that a sentry? No, it's not. But now we're going to have Colossus finding their way on up onto the high ground. Stalkers blink their way on up to the high ground, and some of them will lose their lives, but that just gives Colossus free fire onto the high ground on top of the majority of this army. Stasis Trap is not really going to get a whole lot here, but the Banelings will not make the connections that they are looking for. More and more Stalkers getting blinked on in. The Colossus just there standing strong. There's nothing that SERRAL can do, and Trap, excuse me, and ZEST looks like he is absolutely going to take the victory here. He's going to put himself up 2-0, and I don't think anyone saw that one coming. And now we get into game number 3. SERRAL backs against the wall. He's on the ropes here unexpectedly in the quarterfinals of TSL7. He's down 2-0 against the I Am Katowice finalists, which, again, ZEST has some fantastic PVZ. But I never expected SERRAL to go down 2-0. But before we get on into that anymore, well, we should probably introduce our players. Spawning in the bottom left in the red, his back against the wall, his life in this upper bracket on the line immediately. He is, for NC Sports, SERRAL. And his opponent spawning the bottom right in the blue, taking the first 2 games rather quickly, in fact. He is, for Dragon Phoenix Gaming, ZEST. And so in game 1, all right, we saw ZEST go for the Stargate build. He was able to hold a Queen Walk from SERRAL rather easily. In game number 2, well, we saw Proxy Void Rays. That didn't really work. And actually, or Proxy Oracle, excuse me, and that didn't really work. And actually, for the majority of that game, it did feel like SERRAL was in a really good position. And then he went mutas and got nothing done with it and didn't have enough on the ground. And the Blinkstalker Colossus all in from ZEST got enough done. And just it killed SERRAL there. So in this third game, it is on Blackburn, right? It is a perhaps a more Zerg favored map. It's going to be interesting to see how SERRAL exactly opts to adapt his style, because again, his first couple attempts at beating ZEST, they have not worked. He has tried a couple different things, and they have wildly struck on out, even from positions of advantage, as SERRAL did have in that game number 2. But maybe game number 3, maybe he's going to be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat here. I don't hate Queen Walks on this map. They're a little bit weird because you're like, natural to natural is really short, but natural to third is a lot longer, and with the speed zones, if you don't micro the queens through it properly, it just takes forever. So we may see this, we may not. ZEST, of course, has been playing a lot of 2.5 base carrier on this map in particular to hard counter the Queen Walks that we do see. And okay, Zerglings are already trying to work these rocks down. Now, there's a build that I've seen Raynor win with, where he goes and he just floods a bunch of Ling Bane on this map, and he takes the he takes the north pathway. And note the Protoss doesn't scout it, and suddenly he just kind of Ling Bane busts the Protoss player. And you're like, that shouldn't work, right? It's a Ling Bane bust against Protoss. It should never work. But I mean, Raynor made it work against Showtime. I can't remember who he made it work against, but it was a rather high-profile tournament. So we may see something like that. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You don't really want to bust through a wall if you can find an exposed pylon, but no one ever has an exposed pylon in this day and age. But no. We shouldn't see that. If we see that, I'm going to be kind of sad. Unless it works, then I'm going to be very happy, I guess, because I just won game 5, right? But SERRAL does continue to work away at that one set of rocks in particular, and I guess all he's doing is just kind of telegraphing this desire to take the gold base. And any damage he can get done to those rocks before he takes the base means it's that much easier to knock those rocks down later on, and that just denies ZEST a position on the map, this really power position that he may be able to make use of. But here we go. We talked about it. Well, we have one Oracle done. We have second Stargate on the way before the third base, and this may very well be the carrier build that I was talking about. We're gonna have to see maybe a couple more, 2 more Oracles to really cement that fact. But again, this is something that ZEST has been doing, getting that second Stargate really quickly. And there we go. Okay, Fleet Beacon on the way as well. I think this is absolutely what it is. I mean, there are some weird Void Ray. Wait, how many Oracles do we have? Only 2. Maybe ZEST has adapted and it's 2 Oracles instead of 3. There are some builds that go for like speed Void Rays, but I highly doubt it's going to be that in this situation, knowing what I know about ZEST and considering the fact that we've not seen a single Void Ray yet hit the field. Now, I suppose it could be like a double Stargate and Pulse Crystal Phoenix, but no, we have not seen that in years. Primarily because it's just not nearly as good as the other Stargate options at this point. But again, considering the fact that we see nothing coming out of these Stargates, absolutely it will be carriers here. And how does SERRAL opt to react to this? I don't believe he has scouted it yet. It actually may take him a while to scout it. And if he's reacting to it, right, with some sort of Queen Walk, I don't really like that. In fact, this build feels like it is designed to deal with Queen Walks. So maybe he's just going to go a little bit later. Maybe he hit some sort of Hydra timing. The archetypical approach that Solar has taken to defeating this, because he ran into it 2 or 3 times in a row in ESL Open Cups Korea and North America, is you just get your lair, of course, as we do see SERRAL going for now, and you drop a Nidus and you do Nidus Queen Hydra. And it works out really well because there's just so much anti-air that the carriers really cannot do anything. But interestingly enough here, we see SERRAL, he's gone for +1 melee, which atypical, right? We sometimes see this again if you're going for, Roach Ravagerling Bane or Hydraling Bane. Both styles are rather anachronistic at this point. We don't really see a lot of them. But now SERRAL will scout out the fact that there are carriers on the field, and immediately we see that Spyro go on down. So it looks like his response is probably going to be some sort of like Roach Queen Corruptor style, like Roachling Bane Corruptor here, which I don't think I've seen this as a response to this particular build just yet. So we're gonna have to see just how well it works. Theoretically, it makes sense, right? Similar way to how you would deal with a battle cruiser opening. We just you have queens to defend it first, and then you just get a lot of roaches on the ground to deal with the small amount of army that the player has to deal with any of your ground units, and then you just overbuild corruptors and you kind of pop everything from the sky, and that just happens. We haven't seen that yet. Again, I've not seen a player go for that attempted version, but hell, I don't hate it. Again, it has analogs to how the game is played again in other matchups, so it would not surprise me in the slightest to see that happening. But we do have +1 air attack. It's closer to being done than not done. Second set of carriers on the way as well. So 4 carriers are vastly different than 2, as they are vastly more powerful indeed, especially when they have +1 attack here, and that there is no armor upgrades for the Zerg, right? We don't see that from the Spire because again the Spire is not done yet, but we don't see that on the ground as well. And +1 carriers probably benefits from +1 air attack more than any other really every air unit really heavily benefits from that from the Protoss side. I mean, Phoenix attack twice, Void Rays attack really fast, and carriers have a bunch of interceptors, have 8 interceptors that all individually benefit from that +1. Anyway, we do have corruptors on the field here. Carriers looking for whatever value they can find. As a decent amount of interceptors are going down, but still 23 are on the field. That's what, about 10 less than max. And well, Hydra, or excuse me, the Zerglings and the Roaches, they're not going to get a lot done here. Really, with the Oracles on defense, that's going to be fine. But now we have the Corruptors here, and they're just going to knock down 1 Corruptor immediately. Now, they won't knock down any more because there are not enough of them to really withstand the power of these +1 Corruptors. They will force the recall. They will force ZEST to retreat, at least for the time being here, to batten down his hatches and really prepare for the oncoming assault from SERRAL, because I don't believe SERRAL is all that interested in taking this game to the extreme late game. But yeah, no, he's absolutely not. I mean, yes, he has 4 bases and he does have the gold, but he is building 15 more corruptors. He is just looking to batter down these corruptors from the skies before we see any sort of storm, any sort of significant Archon count that makes it difficult for these corruptors to stay alive. +1 air attack just about done as well. So we do have, of course, static defense on the way here, but corruptors, they're just going to be able to target 2-shot corruptors at this, or carriers at this point. Not the 1-shot, not yet, not just yet. But there are more where that came from indeed. And yes, we do have a shield battery. And actually, a lot of these corruptors are rather low because it looks like they sat under an Archon for 1 or 2 shots, or over an Archon for 1 or 2 shots. And that makes life a little bit difficult. But only, of course, until they regen some HP and the queens arrive. Rather interesting here, seeing the fact that only 1 set of rocks is getting taken down, not the second. But man, that is going to be a massive stasis trap. Indeed, the second one as well. But this army that ZEST has, it needs to fight over static defense. It needs to fight over these Archons, and the Archons are starting to take some damage. Even as these these stasis traps really serve as force fields that makes it so difficult for SERRAL to find his way down the ramp. And now we're starting to see the corruptors. They just are an undefeated fighting force. There's nothing that ZEST can really do to deal with them here. Is now we're starting to see the static defense come up online, but it's not even mattering anymore. Yes, this Archon's trying to do what it can, but the corruptors are too spread. The entire Skytoss army is going down, and now maybe, just maybe, ZEST can build a big enough ground army that's going to be able to defeat this. But as these corruptors go down, and I mean, they're going to take a 4th base with them, as we start to maybe see some of these corruptors die, we're not seeing any more being produced here. It is all on those roaches. SERRAL saying, yeah, I got enough here. In fact, I have too much for you to really have any sort of hope here in this game. The corruptors will not knock down the natural and the 4th base. SERRAL is interested in keeping the majority of them alive because, hey, Broodlord timings are nice. But B, on the off chance that ZEST does decide to go back into Skytoss immediately, he wants to have that safety blanket of a solid 13 corruptors, 15 corruptors that can deal with whatever ZEST throws at him from that perspective here. So the vials will go down. A lot of the static defense is dead. SERRAL now doubling the supply of his opponent, and it is now his time to really take his first map in this series to punish ZEST for the greed of going for this build, of taking that 4th base rather quickly as well. And there's not a lot ZEST can do at this point. It is 100 supply to 14. GG. SERRAL, he's going to take his first map here. And here we are, game number 4, spotting the upper right in the red. He took 1 game. Can he take 2? Can he take 3? He is, for NC Sports, SERRAL. And his opponent spawning in the bottom left. In the blue, he is up 2-1 in this series. From Korea, ZEST. So let's see. The Stargate build worked once. A different Stargate build didn't work there, as ZEST went for that 2-base carrier build, which it works well against the 45 worker queen walk, but that's not what SERRAL went for. He's like, okay, well, you went the carrier build. Time for me to overmake corruptors, and good luck. Which worked out very, very well there for the Finnish Phenom. And now we're in game 4. Now we're in a totally new map here. It will be Oxide. It's a little bit shorter, right around the size of Lightshade. And remember, ZEST made +1 Void Rays work on Lightshade. So we may see something similar happen here, but he had a more aggressive build up his sleeve. He went for the proxy, Proxy Oracle into Glaive Adepts into Blinkstalker Colossus. And while the first 2 things in that process did not work, the third one did. And he did take that game on Juggernaut. Now, it should be noted that if SERRAL does drop down in this map, or we get to game 5 and SERRAL drops down, or ZEST drops down for that matter, this is the upper bracket of the TSL. So whoever loses here, and someone will eventually lose, unfortunately, we're not just getting infinite games of these 2 players duking it out. someone will get sent to the lower bracket, but there is a lower bracket. So whoever loses here, whether it is SERRAL, whether it is ZEST, they have a second shot at life. They have another opportunity to make that grand finals, even if eventually they will have a one map deficit, as they do look to move on into those grand finals. Of course, the winner bracket does come with a one map advantage, which, you know, some people are a fan of, some people are not. I do think it's fair that there is an advantage from the upper bracket, but one can argue that the advantage is just you have to play less games. You have to show less of your strats, and your opponent has to show more. But you talk about showing strats here. This is rather interesting from ZEST. We have a robo being built hidden behind the natural mineral line, a position that realistically SERRAL is unlikely to scout. But we have no other tech. We don't see a Twilight Council. We don't see a Dark Shrine, of course, which would require a Twilight Council. We don't see anything like that. No Stargate either. So this very well may be just a big gateway commitment from ZEST in this game number 4. He's got a map to give it. Even if this doesn't work, you know, maybe put the fear of God in SERRAL and make it that much more difficult for SERRAL to figure out what exactly his opponent is going for in game 5. But oh, this is a thing. We're gonna see disruptor drops come on in from ZEST in this game, and disruptor drops are primarily a PvT thing. Right, there's something that Nina loves as much as she loves her Colossus drops. It's a similar idea, but maybe ZEST is going to be able to find his value, because we did see Zoun do this as a result, as a follow-on from Glaive Adepts. That's of course what is called the Zoun build, but it is far rarer to see a Protoss go immediately into disruptor drops, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Generally, you want to do something that forces the Zerg into units that trade poorly against this. But we don't see that, at least not yet here. So the Warp Prism will, and actually, oh, I like this. So it's a Warp Prism with one Stalker just looking to knock down High Ground Vision, knock down any Overlords, things like that, that may exist. And while the Zerglings, they shouldn't even get a lot of damage done because there's a Warp Prism here. And ZEST will be able to micro that to his heart's content. Like that, a couple of deaths getting warped on into, just saying, hey, you know what? Zerglings, go away, please. Run away. You don't get to do, you don't get to have fun here, not in this game, as we're going to see that Overlord go on down. ZEST has committed a lot to making this happen, a surprising amount to really making sure that this Overlord goes down. And still, we're going to see a scout here from ZEST, I do believe. I believe he will be able to see what's happening in the natural. And there we go. Yeah, he sees everything he needs to see. He's well aware of what is happening just now, but the question is not whether he sees it. The question is whether he is able to respond to it. All right, so now we have those two Colossus out in the Warp Prism, and as expected, behind this we do have Colossus on the way. When you get two disruptors like this, there's only one build it may be, and this is a 2 disruptor into 2 Colossus all in that we see occasionally, 15% of the time, maybe. Not even that. So you move out on the map, you try to get damage done with those disruptors, maybe assassinate a queen or two. Ideally, you're taking out an entire mineral line, but no, that's not exactly what we see here as well. One disruptor shot will go off, second one will just not even attempt it, and SERRAL doesn't take any damage from that thus far. Now, it is interesting that we don't have extended thermal lance on the way, but I believe if it's all in, you get the extended thermal lance just a little bit later. You get it as you're kind of moving out on the map, because the important thing is getting those Colossus, is getting those sentries, is just spending your gas on things that are, again, not upgrades. And actually, no, okay, so this is going to be a bit of an abbreviated attack. Normally, it's 2 Colossus, 2 Immortal, or 2 Colossus, 2 Disruptors. That's kind of how that one works. As a Queen will get just taken on down here, assassinated by those glowing balls of fire. But ZEST he's going to move out a little bit faster. He's only going to have 1 Colossus, not 2. And this does mean that it will hit faster than SERRAL is perhaps anticipating, even as he does set up a truly massive surround on the map. But it's a difficult surround to really pull off, because again, those rocks are not taken down. So as SERRAL does try to make this defense happen, as ZEST does look to move on forward, well, I don't know how much a bunch of Zerglings are going to do here. So we have disruptor shots. They're going to go on out, and there's the move. Actually, at the end of the day, it's really not going to get a whole lot here. We'll only get that singular disruptor. But ZEST is doing a really good job of being patient here, waiting for these disruptors to find value. And while he does that, he warps in more. He goes and he knocks down creep timbers. He removes the vision that ZEST has on the map that makes it so difficult for ZEST to really push on in. Now we have the engagement starting in earnest here. Force fields are going to be rather nice indeed. And there we go. So we will see a really big shot on a bunch of disruptors, on a bunch of queens, but it was only one. So things aren't really dying just yet. But now disruptors are starting to go on down here. The Zerglings, they're all dying. And oh, will they get a disruptor? Not even here. Nice blitz there from ZEST. Are going to make sure that his army stays alive at this point. Disruptor staying alive as well. Looks like, yeah, actually both of them still alive here. The Colossus firing strong. And it's only queens that remain here. ZEST, it looks like he's found his opening. It looks like he's found what he needs, as maybe SERRAL reacted just a little bit too late. Maybe he greeted just a little bit too hard, but at the end of the day, this all-in is catching SERRAL off guard. It is doing things to SERRAL that are not often done. It is beating SERRAL in this game. When was the last time we saw SERRAL lose to a 2-base Protoss player? It's not all that often here, but well, it is happening here today. ZEST, he's still down on army supply, but he's going to be down on army supply into the very end until this last warp in, where suddenly he's got that lead. He has that one Colossus that is still firing strong. We still have, it looks like actually the disruptors did go down. The Colossus is just doing so much here. And to couple that with the Blink Stalkers, it's so difficult for SERRAL to find his way out of his natural to defend that third base. We just have yet more and more force fields underway in this game, and it's interesting. We're getting a lot of zealots warped in, but there's no zealot speed. No zealot speed is even getting started, but they're buffers, right? If you have a lot of minerals and no gas, you buy zealots. So that is exactly what ZEST is doing here, as the Roachborn is going down, which means the last of the roaches have been made, at least for a while. And now ZEST, he's got SERRAL in a chokehold. SERRAL cannot access his third base. He cannot mine from his third base, but SERRAL, it's his turn to maybe try to make a push out happen here. But the force fields plus the Stalkers here, the Colossus, they're just firing so strong. SERRAL really cannot take this fight, even with a third of ZEST's army not here to take the fight with him. So the Queens, they're kind of trying to take this fight. Eventually, this Colossus will go down. Not even. Nice hot pickup there from ZEST. The Queens cannot get the target fire appropriately. SERRAL, he's winning fights on both sides, and GG ZEST. He takes game number 4, and with it, he moves on to the semifinals 3-1 over former world champion.